a nice afternoon and evening. Our last session is entitled When All Else Fails, or When Things Fall Off the Rails. So we're going to talk about what probably most people don't talk about, which is what happens when we kind of lose our prayer energy. So if you had a chance after session 2 to kind of look at if it's too much kitchen or too much living room, you can sort of see if you had to spend some time with some of the questions. Are you getting burned out? Are you feeling isolated? Are you kind of on your way to going off the rails? And it's a good idea to occasionally look at those things, and because we get caught up in our lives and what's going on, and we might not know what's happening before it's too late. And it's kind of like the frog in the water sort of situation where, you know, you put a frog, and I don't really know if this is true, but you all know what I'm talking about. If you put the frog in the water and then you heat it up gradually, they don't know enough to jump out. But if they jump into the hot water, they know enough to jump out. So one way to kind of prevent that water from getting too hot without our knowledge is to keep asking ourselves these questions so that we don't have that experience, or maybe before it happens where we're totally burned out or we're feeling depressed and isolated, that we can kind of catch it in time. But sometimes things happen that throw us off and totally derail a good thing that we have going. And it can be something simple like someone coming to visit us at home, that a guest comes in and kind of upsets the routine. And once we get the routine upset, it's kind of hard to go back, or maybe, you know, it's combined with some other stuff. I mean, I've taken vacations where I've totally gotten off my prayer ritual and eaten whatever I wanted and slept late and just got rid of my whole routine. And then when you come back from vacation, it's hard to restart. Not, you know, sometimes, most of the time I can do it, but you know, it's those things that cause a restart. Maybe it's not because we're burned out, or maybe it's not because we feel isolated or depressed, but just because something's throwing us off of our routine. Major changes can really do a number on our prayer practice. Changes like we have a health issue that's pretty dire, and then that becomes sort of our focus, and maybe we have to change things that we're doing to accommodate or manage our health situation, and that can really run havoc over anything that we've tried to do. Other things, large life events or schedule changes that come from those large life events can also wreak havoc. And recently I went through one of those myself, and it really derailed me for a long time. And what happened was I was going along, kind of chugging along like I was talking about, and my little dog trot, had a great routine going on. And then my husband retired. And then everything changed because all of a sudden he's going.
Can't hear you.
Boy, big coffee with him. But then what would happen is right after we'd have coffee, it would be time to go, and I needed to go to church to volunteer, or I had grandkids that needed to be picked up at school or taken to school in the morning, or their parents are in an uproar, or there's something going on that requires my immediate attention. And so I got off my prayer rails, and I couldn't get back on because I just wasn't sure what to do. And I have this list of priorities. Every year I do goal setting. Now I can't help myself because I am a Martha, and I also was in sales for the first 25 years of my life. But the claim I make to balance my life is 4 of the goals are being goals, and 4 of the goals are doing goals. And one of my my being goals was to be in relationship with the people who are most important in my life and to be present to them. So this sort of fit that, and I'm trying to figure out, well, how am I going to accommodate all of this? And I just didn't, it made me into a deer in the headlights, which actually in all the years I've been trying to have a prayer practice was the first major time where I just went totally off the rails. You know, and it's interesting because when I wrote the book Contemplative Knitting, you know, I had the little stops and starts like you do, like, oh, I'm back from vacation, I got to start my routine again, or, oh, you know, so-and-so just left and now I got to kind of get back to my routine. I don't have to worry about my guest or whatever. So I'd have the little stops and starts. And so, you know, I felt like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I can restart and all of that. And what I tell people in the book is that the first step to restarting, whether it's your prayer practice or a workout plan or a diet or whatever, is to have a plan. So when you fall off, you can then execute the plan to restart. So think it through ahead of time. What would I need? What would it take? What kind of help and support can I plan that I can use when I eventually fall off the wagon? And that came from reading about spies in, I think it was World War II. And before they would go execute a mission, they would have a plan of what they were going to do. And sometimes this one example I read about is that they had to like crawl through the mud infested, mosquito infested swamp to get to a place where they could watch some troop movements. And they made the plan ahead of time is that they were going to do that in 3 days. And it wasn't that long of a distance, but they had to do it slowly so they wouldn't be detected. And they knew it was going to be hard because it was going to be muddy and wet and they were going to be bitten by mosquitoes. And the whole reasoning is you develop a plan when you're safe and warm and not in that situation. And then you promise yourself, I'm not going to deviate from that plan. So when you're getting bit by the mosquitoes and you're soaked, then you say to yourself, well, when I was sane and in my right mind, I made this plan and that's what I need to follow. So that's sort of like the theory I came up with. Okay, I may be despondent that I've kind of fallen off the wagon and maybe I'm beating myself up or maybe I feel ashamed or whatever. I'm a priest, I should be able to do this or whatever negative talk is going on. So if you have a plan in place, you can just start to execute the plan. So part of what I suggest is that you figure out your support systems. You know, who is going to support you when you need it? Are you going to have a prayer partner, maybe somebody that you pair up with that texts you and says to you, how is it going? How are you doing with your prayer plan? Are you doing what you need to be doing? You know, some sort of accountability, or you have a spiritual director, or you have a community that, you know, can support you when you're going through this. And when we do fall out of our good routine or get off of our prayer practice, you know, it can be a matter of degrees. We can go from doing absolutely nothing to just kind of going through the motions and knowing that we're just kind of going through the motion, but not really feeling it and feeling bad about it or whatever. And sometimes that can really spark a negative feedback loop, which just gets worse and worse and worse. It's like the longer you go, the harder it is to restart, and the more you feel badly that you're not restarting and that you should be able to restart, and all the negative stuff that you've had coming at you throughout your life just starts to roll down onto you. And you know, and I've had that experience, and it just gets more and more difficult. And for me, in my own experience, so I had a plan, because, you know, if you don't want to be someone that isn't doing what you suggest to other people. So I had a plan, which was to go to my spiritual director and kind of process it and talk it out. But I didn't want to go because I didn't want to admit that I was having a problem, and I didn't want to admit that I needed help. Even though I have been in the situation where people have been brave enough to come to me and tell me that they're having a problem and they need help. And I praise them for doing that and say, well, we all go through this. Everybody has moments like this, and it's true. But sometimes when you're in a position of leadership, or you're ordained, or you've written books on prayer, it's hard to admit, even to myself, that I really needed some help. And I really did need some help, because I just went from years of practicing, having a prayer practice, to zero, to nothing. So it's interesting. I think we go get help when the pain of not getting help becomes greater than the pain of going to get help. Yeah. Pain is a great motivator. And so the pain I was in by not getting help became greater than the pain I was feeling to go admit that I needed help. So I went to my spiritual director. And being the Martha that I am, I said, well, what can I do? And the spiritual director just looked at me and he said, nothing. You can do absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, I'm telling you to do nothing. This did not make the Martha happy. I'm thinking to myself, no, I really want you to give me a list, tell me to, I don't know, open the book, sit down, just do something. And what he did was the exact opposite. He says, nope, I don't want you to do anything. I don't want you to try to pray. I don't want you to open a book. I just forget about it for a season. Well, my husband retired last May, so it was Easter season, and I didn't go to him until, after Pentecost. So that's a long season. I said, really? He said, yeah, just don't do anything. Come Advent, you'll figure it out. Talk about a non-anxious presence. I was anxious and I wanted him to be anxious. You should be anxious with me, right? I need you to come into this drama with me and feel this and do all of this. And he totally popped my little balloon, and I left there, and I'm like, I used my F word. I said, fine. That's my F word. Fine. I'll do nothing. I will do nothing. So I did nothing for the whole season of Pentecost. Now, what happened is that I did spend a lot of time thinking, which is unusual for an extrovert, because usually, we think as we talk, but I was in my head a lot, and I was thinking, and I realized that it wasn't just my husband's retirement. My mother, believe it or not, had gotten remarried at the age of, let's see, how old was she? 86. She turned 90 yesterday, still married, same guy. So they've made it 4 years. He's also 90. And so after her marriage, I had been talking to her almost every day for the past 10, 11 years after my dad died. And she was no longer calling, and she was extremely happy, but it was a real loss for me after daily contact with her. So that sort of came up, and I said, oh, maybe I'm kind of really not just dealing with my husband's retirement and his presence in my life, but maybe I'm dealing with the loss of not having that contact with my mother. So, I thought about that. And then in earlier that year, my daughter-in-law had a miscarriage, and that was hard. It was hard because it so devastated her. And of course it's devastating for the grandparents, to have that dream sort of die. And it was really difficult, and she was having a rough time. And she actually had to go through labor and delivery, and I was in the room, and it was a stillborn child. And so it was extremely difficult, and nobody kept it together for her in that room except for me. Thank God for all the training that I had had. And I never really allowed myself to kind of process that grief. And so I know a lot about grief, and I know that eventually it'll raise its hand if you don't acknowledge it. And so I think my prayer life kind of came to a halt because I was doing a lot of grieving and I wasn't acknowledging any of the grief. And so there was a part of me that had to stop doing all the things I was doing so that I could acknowledge this grief and loss that had occurred in my life. And the other interesting thing that had been happening right before I kind of lost my prayer practice was I had gotten addicted to Audible. I subscribed to Audible. I started listening to Audible. There are some amazing books. I mean, and then someone recommended some thriller or whatever, and I got super hooked on it. And I'm walking around the house with headsets on. I'm doing laundry, I'm emptying the dishwasher, I'm taking out the dog, I'm looking for things like chores to do. The house has never been cleaner. I mean, I'm looking for chores to do so I can listen to the book. And my husband's kind of looking at me, he goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Shh, stop. I'm in I gotta rewind because I gotta hear what's happening. I'm sitting in parking lots while waiting to go in the grocery store until I can get up my discipline to shut it down so I can go grocery shopping." And then I realized, well, I can listen to it in the grocery store. Of course, I'm coming home with half of the stuff that I needed in my cart. But that just gave me a chance to go back and hear more of the book. So I didn't realize that was another way I was choosing to deal with my grief because it just kept it all at bay. I didn't have to think about anything because there was just no time to think. So as the season of Pentecost, or ordinary time, as some people call it, wore on, I became aware of some of these things. I quit listening to the Audible, except if I was working out. So I got in better shape. I only allowed myself to listen to Audible if I was running or going to the gym, but that was it. I had to cut it off. And I began to feel a shift in myself. And so Advent started to approach, and I have been grounded in the liturgical year for years because once my kids got out of school, which was the kind of context I lived in, was the school year, because the kids go back in September and then there's school vacations and then there's the summer off. And so my life was grounded in the school year. But when they left, I realized I need a context. I need to be grounded in something. So I chose, what better thing to choose than the liturgical year? So it means a lot to me. So Advent is approaching, and it's a time of waiting. It's a time the new church year begins. And I started to think about what is that going to bring? I mean, what's going to happen? And of course, I'm now at this point, I'm saying, God, you got to help me because I can't help myself. And I think that's such a grace-filled place to be when we have that moment where we can just say, I'm powerless, I'm helpless. And I was telling someone earlier, I think when I've always had an AA meeting in any church I was at, and they get it. They know, the people at AA, they know they're powerless. And that's the only gift from addiction, is that you're powerless. The rest of us can live in the illusion that we're not powerless, but we all are powerless. And I kind of got to that point because I just had to let it go and say, God, you got to help me. And when I did that, I kind of felt the desire coming back of wanting to get back in relationship with God, to kind of turn a metanoia of sorts. I turned back toward God in this period of Advent. And so I just kind of sat around doing nothing, like my spiritual director had said. And then one morning when I woke up, And when you wake up early morning before the naysayer voice gets in your head, before the Eeyore starts to come in and bother you, like that first moment of consciousness, you know, this idea came to me that said, you know what, Julie? For Advent, you need to knit some blankets for stillborn babies. Because when they came for that child, they wrapped that child in this beautiful hand knitted blanket, this tiny, tiny baby. And it meant so much to us at the time. And here I am a knitter, and it said, and Advent is about the coming, you know, the coming and the second coming, but the coming of the Christ child. And what better time of year than to knit a baby blanket for somebody that's going to be in the same place of grief that I found myself in. And it was the perfect prayerful project that brought me back to doing some contemplative knitting. And in addition to that, another idea came to me that I should take the Advent word of the day and write a meditation. So that all of a sudden energized me to kind of get back doing a spiritual discipline that I never would have anticipated. So I put it out on my contemplative knitting blog to knitters. I said, hey, if you want to do this, here's a website you can go and find out the requirements of what you need to knit and the kind of yarn and the color and all of the requirements. And then you can start knitting. Knit with me during Advent, and we will create some of these blankets, and that will be our spiritual Advent knitting for this year. And in the meantime, I started writing spiritual posts on the Advent word of the day that's put out by the Episcopal Church. And that absolutely changed where I was and how I was feeling, and kind of helped me restart. And I was so grateful, so full of gratitude that had come as a result of having a period of time, a long period of time of being in the Mary mode, like we talked about, like my friend Judy went through, that, you know, I hadn't anticipated, but was fruitful time. And what I learned from that is that, thank God, I had someone who gave me permission to stop trying so hard, to stop trying to make it work, but to let it go and just wait. So I waited for Advent, and when Advent came, it kind of came. So I made it through Advent and Christmas, and got a lot of blankets, sent them off. It was very fulfilling, and I kind of felt like, okay, I'm started, but I really would love to, you know, get back to the daily office, and I'm just still not sure how to do it. You know, I'm now entrenched in this morning coffee with my husband. He's not a big fan of doing the office, although he's done it, you know, because, you know, he's just said, sure, fine, happy wife, happy life, that kind of thing. But, you know, I kind of wanted to have this prayer time and immerse myself back in it. And again, one morning, early winter, I woke up and this voice said to me, Julie, what do you do 3 times a day without fail besides eat? And because he wants to have lunch with me too. He waits for me to have lunch. I mean, even if it's late. So, I mean, I knew that wasn't going to work. So I'm thinking, what do I do 3 times a day without fail? I walk the dog. Now I have an Afghan hound, has to be exercised. Number 100 of stupidity in terms of dogs. If the German Shepherd, Poodle, or whatever is number 1, she's 100. They're dumb dogs. You can't tie them out. They won't stay home because they're like a cat. So you have to walk them. And I knew that when I got her, because I figured, okay, this dog is going to make me exercise whether I like it or not. And so the 2 of us will be out walking, and all kinds of weather, when it's snowing sideways or it's pouring rain. And I subscribe to the whole idea that there's no bad weather, just bad clothing. So if you have good clothing, you're fine. So I'm thinking, well, how do I do the office when I walk the dog? These are the conversations that I'm having with myself. And, I've seen this woman, I live near an old railroad bed and it's very flat. I see this woman walking all the time reading a novel. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. And, but then I thought, well, I've got a phone. I can get the office up on the phone. You can listen to the office. There's all kinds of apps and you can listen to the readings and you can listen to the Psalms and all of this. And so I thought, well, what the heck, I'll try it. So the dog and I go out and I said, you know what? We're going to do morning prayer. And she's like, sure, whatever. And, she stops a lot along the way. So it's not like we're running or anything. And I started doing the office, walking the dog. Now it's crazy. This is not what I envisioned when I fell off my prayer wagon, but it was through the grace of God that I let it evolve. And so now I walk the dog and I'm hearing the office, saying the office. Sometimes I just stop in the woods and hear the birds and read the prayers. And it's just been incredibly life-giving. And it's a very kind of calming, merry kind of thing to do. So I realized when I let go of my own expectations, when I acknowledged my grief and what I was going through, when I went and got help from the support system that I had in fact put in place and was a little ashamed to go to, but so happy I did, that I was able then to restart, and that it was time well spent doing nothing for me. Because had I not gotten that permission, I probably would have just kept beating my head against the wall until I got to the total burnout stage. And I think when we get there, it takes even greater kind of intervention to get out of that. So that's now my story, and I know that this happens. And I guess what I want to say, having experienced that myself, is that if that happens, we shouldn't feel bad about it. It's just a human thing that happens to us. And it's not bad and it's not good. It's just that, maybe there's something else we need to think about, which is why I did put in your handout kind of at the end, is think about if this happens to you, regardless of what degree, what has recently changed in my life? And that is the question that helped me understand about my mother's marriage, the miscarriage, my husband's retirement. What is different? It doesn't even have to be that big of a thing. It could be we went from daylight savings time to whatever the other time is. It could be something even simple. The other real important question is, where is my energy going? Or do I have any energy? So if I don't have any energy, I'm either burned out or I'm just feeling isolated and depressed. And then we need to do something different. I think for people that are burned out, if we think about our emotions as tanks, if we let them drain to nothing, then we need to know what's going to fill up our emotional tanks. For me, it's going to a yarn store, hard to believe, but it doesn't mean I'm there to buy anything. I'm just there to look at the colors and feel the softness and look at the samples and the pictures and talk to the people. So for the extroverts, that's kind of what it means for me. Walking in the woods, listening to some music, doing something creative, painting, coloring, whatever. I think for the people that are feeling isolated, trying to do something that is kind of community oriented, although it's been so tough with COVID, and COVID is a big event that's occurred that could easily have thrown any of us off. So I think for me in COVID, starting a gratitude journal, everybody knows that if we practice gratitude, it changes the mood, changes who we are. So I made a journal, I did a collage thing and I made a journal, and I've been using it as a gratitude journal, and that definitely has changed things for me. The other big helpful thing was thinking about a time when I felt most connected to my prayer life. When was that time and what was happening at that moment in my life? and trying to ferret out like what was it about that time that helped me feel so connected to God. And I think for all of us, it's all a matter of degrees, what happens to us and how we decide to deal with it. But you know, I stand up here telling you that my life with a prayer practice has been a roller coaster ride, just like any kind of relationship we have in life. And there are moments, as we all know from the great mystics of all time, that they go through a dark night of the soul, and sometimes they go for years and years and years. But by the grace of God, you know, they keep on keeping on, and a lot of times those spiritual mystics were living in monastic communities, and they kept worshiping even when they felt nothing, you know. And it's through the grace of God and the power of the Holy Spirit that they were able to continue to kind of do that kind of thing. So I hope that this time together has helped in maybe raising up your level of awareness about what's happening with your spiritual life and your prayer practice, and maybe might give you a little impetus to prepare for those dry moments or dry times, you know, the seasons of prayer and the seasons of the liturgical year, and as we all move through it together, and not to feel bad or ashamed or anything when we need help, because we all need help at certain points in our time. And what I used to tell other people, and I had to tell myself, is that when we need help, it's an opportunity that we are giving to someone else to minister to us. And a lot of times as associates and as professed people and ordained people, we're the ones ministering to others. And it's great to be on that side. There's a certain kind of power being on that side, but allowing yourself to be helpless, allowing yourself to ask for help, allowing yourself to surrender and feel that powerlessness is actually a moment of incredible grace that's given to us by God. And for that, we can be thankful. So, amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Thank you. And now we will turn to Celtic Compline to close the day. Calm us, Lord, as you calm the storm. Still us, Lord, keep us from harm. Let all the tumult within us cease. Enfold us, Lord, in your peace. Calm us, Lord, as you calm the storm. Still us, Lord, keep us from harm. Let all the tumult within us cease. Enfold us, Lord, in your peace. Calm us, Lord, as you calm the storm. Still us, Lord, keep us from harm. Let all the tumult within us cease. Enfold us, Lord, in your peace. Holy God, bless the work that is done, the work that is to be. Holy God, bless the servants that we are, and the servants we shall become. The peace of God be over us to shelter us, under us to uphold us, about us to protect us, behind us to direct us, within us to heal us, ever with us to save us. In you, O Lord, have I taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Incline your ear to me. Make haste to deliver me. Be my strong rock, a castle to keep me safe. For you are my crag and my stronghold. For the sake of your name, lead me and guide me. Take me out of the net that they have secretly set for me. For you are my tower of strength. Into your hands I commend my spirit. For you have redeemed me, O Lord, O God of truth. Glory to the Father, and to the Son,
and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen.
The sacred three,
To save,
to shield, to surround, the heart, the home,
this night and every night.
Search us, O God, and know our hearts.
Test us and know our thoughts,
See if there is any wicked way in us.
and lead us in the way everlasting.
O well-beloved Son of the Heavenly Father, forgive.
O God who is one, O God who is true, O God who is first, O God who is one substance, O God only mighty, O God truly humble, in three persons, ever merciful, forgive.
O God of light, this night.
O darken not to us your light,
O God of light, this night.
close not your gladness to our sight.
Keep your people, O God, in the arms of your embrace.
Shelter us under your wings,
Be our light in the darkness.
be our calm in distress,
Be our light in anxiety.
be our strength in our weakness,
Be our comfort in pain.
be our song in the night.
In peace will I lie down.
For
For
it is you, O Lord, you alone who make me to rest secure.
Be it on your own beloved arm, O
O God of grace,
that we in peace shall each awake. Keep before us and deep in our hearts the deepening and strengthening of our companions' faith. Assist us to assist each other in our praying, our living, our loving. Be the peace of the Spirit ours this night. Be the peace of the Son ours this night. Be the peace of the Father ours this night. The peace of all peace be ours this night. In the name of the one who creates, redeems, and ever sustains us. Amen.
That concludes session 3 in the evening. We will resume our Zoom broadcast tomorrow morning. We will begin being available at 7 o'clock. The service will begin at 7:30. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.